People pay good money to see this movie. When they go out to a theater, they want cold sodas, hot popcorn, and no monsters in the projection booth.
Everyone pretend podcasting isn't boring.
Turn it off. Turn it off.
My name is Fred Armisen, and I'm a comedian.
Are you a big podcast fan?
No. Fucking podcasting, what a shit name that is.
This story will change the way you think about podcasts.
Morning, everybody. It's Adam Curry here with you. And
Adam Curry from MTV?
The technology of podcasting was invented in 2000.
It's really simple syndication.
Before anyone was podcasting, before there was an iPod.
I got a call from Apple.
Here's another one. Adam Curry is one of the guys that invented podcasting.
Steve wants to meet with you. And he says, I want to put podcasting into iTunes. Is that okay? I'm like, yeah.
Long before, television, film, radio, the printed word, we've been communicating with each other in sound. When you make a radio documentary or you make a podcast, I feel like we're playing with fire. It's elemental to who we are.
I'm a podcast host, and this is a film about audio storytelling.
I know that the world is waiting to find out how cool this is.
38% of the U.S. population 12 plus listened to a podcast in the last month. That ain't nothing, right? That's bigger than Twitter.
But there have been some growing pains.
The podcast is moving to Spotify.
When a company with money is interested in you, they're not interested in you. And they're not even interested in what you create. They're interested in your audience. And you can sell that audience exactly once.
That's when things got complicated.
Businesses finally found what's going on with our little secret world.
I hope that while the money floods the space, that the integrity of the medium is able to stay.
It's really hard to keep humanity at the center of it, I think, when you scale.
I feel like we've been in a bit of a wild podcast bubble.
I think the bubble is popping, yeah.
Companies that fund shows are de-risking.
I think podcasting is the medium. It's sitting around a fire telling stories. It's what we've always done. And the thing that was magical to me is that with a voice and nothing else, you can create anything.
For more information, go to aoamovie.com. Podcast, am I right? Welcome to the Projection Booth. I'm your host, Mike White. Join me once again is Mr. Chris Stachiw.
You guys like to talk about movies?
Also joining us all the way from the Podnews Daily Newsletter is Mr. James Cridland.
Hey, thank you so much for asking.
On this special episode of the Projection Booth, we are looking at the 2025 documentary from director Shaun Colón, Age of Audio. The film is narrated by and stars Ronald Big Ron Young Jr., the host of numerous award-winning podcasts, who talks us through his story as well as the history up to now of the medium of podcasting. Quite a big task for an 82-minute film. We will be spoiling this movie as much as we can, so if you don't want anything ruined, turn off the podcast and come back after you've seen the film and experience the entire history of podcasting. We will still be here. So, Chris, I want to start with a question about how you came to know about podcasts and how you decided to start making one.
I'll keep that to the 5-minute answer.
The earth formed, then it cooled.
Fish then crawled out of lakes. No, I can actually tell you the first podcast I remember listening to was in 2006 with Film Spotting. And that was the first time I'd ever heard a podcast. And I mean, that's kind of, I guess, maybe not so much anymore. That used to be like the standard bearer for movie podcasts. Now I would say it's the Projection Booth podcast with Mike White. Oof.
Hey,
wow.
Whoa.
Shameless self-promotion, everybody.
Wow.
But that was kind of the first movie podcast or first podcast I had ever heard. And I didn't get into podcasting proper until 2014. So about 8 years later, I had started a movie review website on my own because I was just looking for something to do in the month of October. And a friend of mine reached out to me and was like, hey, you should do a podcast. And that was that is kind of what it feels like. I've had 1, 2, 3 different co-hosts. The person who helped me start the show, I haven't talked to in almost a decade, and that's just, it's part of this. It's part of the journey of podcasting. Nothing is ever static. And if things are static for too long, you might be becoming complacent, which is kind of a thing that I'm struggling with right now as someone who's been podcasting for going on 11 years now. Yikes, that's horrifying. I mean, there's not much to it. I mean, the documentary makes it pretty clear, like, if you want to do it in this day and age, you can just do it. So ain't no pomp and circumstance here, other than just liking movies and wanting to talk about movies with my friends. And that's kind of what this ended up being.
Because there are no other types of podcasts other than movie podcasts.
I mean, as far as anyone who listens to the things we make might be concerned, there would be nothing else. That's not true. I mean, I've done other stuff. I did a paranormal podcast for a while. That was pretty successful, actually. But the movie podcast is kind of what I've gravitated back towards this whole time. So can't get away from it. Movies are just too intrinsically linked to who I am. But yeah, they don't mention that at all in this documentary. So don't worry about it, folks.
And James, how about yourself?
I first got involved with podcasting in 2005, a long, long time ago. I was working for a radio station, and I saw that podcasting was a thing, and so I turned our breakfast show into a podcast. And it was doing, I think at one point it was doing somewhere in the region of 15,000 downloads an episode. It was doing really well, which is astonishing these days. I started writing Podnews, which is a newsletter all about podcasting, in 2017, and have written it every day since. So yeah. I should say 2 things. Firstly, I'm in this movie. I hope you noticed my excellent cameo for 3 seconds. But also, secondly, I do not watch movies. So I used to joke that the last movie that I ever saw was Superman 3. That may not be entirely true, but it's nearly true. And so I was there and I was thinking I should go and listen to an episode of this show to make sure that I understand how this show works. And so I went through your more than 1,000 episodes, desperately trying to find a movie that I had actually seen. I hit on Day of the Jackal, which is 2.5 years ago, but nevertheless, it was a good show. So yeah. So if you're expecting movie critique from me, you are going to be sadly mistaken.
I'm not sure there's any movie critique to be had with this movie. Like, it's a documentary. I mean, I was under the impression this conversation was going to be more about podcasting. I don't know. Like, it's weird to watch a movie about podcasting. James, you mentioned you were in the movie. I was at that Ambies where he won all of his awards. I was sitting in that room because that was last year in Los Angeles. Tracy Mattel was there. So yeah, I was in that room. I remember him winning all of his awards and him coming back up like, it was like 4 times, I think, something to that effect, to the point. I mean, they show it in the documentary where he comes back up a couple times, but that was pretty crazy because I was like, oh my God, are they going to be at the Ambies in Los Angeles last year? Yes, in fact, they are. Like, okay.
Did you watch this movie?
No. Yes, I did. Of course I did.
We've had that before, too, on a thing we've co-hosted before. So that wouldn't,
I saw it on the big screen, indeed, or the big screen in my front room. So yes, absolutely.
Shaun even says that you were supposed to be in this film at some point.
I was, if you listen very carefully, just before the Ambies sequence, they clipped a bit of the Podnews Daily podcast, which I also do. So, yeah, so you get to hear my exciting English accent in the middle of that for about 3 minutes. Notice I'm not in the credits. And all the way through, there's lots of clips of, this happened, and then there's a screenshot of the Hollywood Reporter, and then this happened, and there's a screenshot of Bloomberg. And I was there going, there must be a screenshot of Podnews, right? There must be a screenshot of Oh, there isn't a screenshot of
In the podcast movie, you would think there would be, but there isn't.
In the entire podcast movie. But still, there we are. Yeah, but it was a great watch. And I mean, I know a number of the people there. I think the first thing that I noticed in the movie is that it is clearly a movie that was recorded at 2 totally different times. So quite a lot of people look weirdly 6 or 7 years younger than they really are. So very clearly this movie was filmed and shot in 2019 and then again in 2023, 24. And so you've got this sort of a slightly odd juxtaposition of, Adam Curry, for example, and Dave Weiner, clearly interviewed a while ago. Tom Webster, clearly interviewed a while ago. And I think, that's the sort of the thing that I guess I would only notice given that I'm in the industry. But it was an interesting watch.
Well, you probably recognized a lot more people than I recognized. Even when I was talking with Shaun, he was really impressed with Roman Mars, and I was just like, I don't know who that is.
You've never listened to 100% 100% Invisible?
No.
I can't believe it.
I've never listened to an episode of Serial either, though I know.
And also, by the way, it's...
I know.
And also, by the way, it's 99% invisible. It's not 100% invisible. So that just goes to show how often I listen to it as well. No, I was watching this and going, oh, look, there's Julie. Oh, look, there's Adam and all the people who I know well. And then there were a couple of people in there and I was thinking, why have you been put in this movie? Which is always the way. But it was nice. I liked so Act 1 is all about the origin of podcasting. It's not, the history of podcasting is a bit of a contentious, and this follows the relatively standard history, which is that Adam Curry and Dave Weiner invented it, and they may have invented the technology, but actually the first podcaster was Robin Williams, the comedian. He was doing podcasts. He was recording interviews with guests in his house and then putting them out on Audible, onto the Audible player, which you could then download and have a listen to while you were walking the dog in the year 2000. So actually, it's a little bit more complicated, but it probably needs to be, a relatively simple story for the film. But it was, it was nice to see Dave, nice to see Adam. The conversation, I think, I rather liked the bit where Adam is telling a story about Steve Jobs, and you see Steve Jobs, it's not, but you see him miming to the words that Adam is saying. And I thought that was a very clever, I'm sure that's on all the time in movies these days, and I've not seen it, but I thought that was a very clever tool to help tell a particular story.
It's very drunk history in that way. The whole mouthing the thing that the person is telling as the story, but I don't think that the person telling the story was drunk. In fact, I don't think anybody in this movie is drunk, even Joe Rogan.
Yeah, where is Joe Rogan in all this? They couldn't get old Joe to sit down for 5 minutes?
Well, they use a lot of clips of him, that's for sure.
You're going to have to. Given the proliferation of Joe Rogan's podcast, how could you not? It's impossible to not mention Joe Rogan.
Watching Leo there. Leo very famously doesn't get on with Adam Curry at all. And it was a very entertaining first few minutes of Leo Laporte saying, the MTV guy. I was thinking, oh, wow, okay, here we go. No, but it was a nicely told history. It's a little bit heavy on the Apple stuff. It's a little bit heavy on the Ben Hammersley stuff. Ben may have coined the word, but he didn't really get it into the public usage. As an overview of the history, I think it was quite a good watch.
Yeah, it's very interesting that they set this up as a podcast episode, and it didn't really click for me. The first time I watched this, I was a little overwhelmed just with all of the information coming at me. And there's a moment in the film where it feels like they just make this huge jump, and I think it's kind of like a sidebar or like a little bit of a tangent, and then they come back. But when they make this one leap, and I'm trying to remember exactly where that is, I'll have to look at my notes. I'm just like, whoa, what just happened? Like, we just jumped like 10 years. And I think it's that thing that you're talking about as far as the marriage of the newer footage plus the older footage. Some of it jives pretty well. Using Big Ron as our narrator is pretty interesting, and having him walk us through this whole history. But sometimes that marriage doesn't necessarily gel as much as I think it should. But I think overall it is a clever use of him as our host and walking us through this and really letting us have one person. I was calling him a narrator, whereas Shaun is very much, he's more of a podcast host. He's the host of this film, even does an ad read, even does his Patreon drop, all those kind of things. We have a live ad read in the middle of this film for Squarespace, which, I was impressed by that, though I think that Casper Mattresses probably should have done the
Sherry's Berries, baby.
BetterHelp.com, MeUndies. That's another one.
Man, Jesus.
Oh, they are.
And they do not have a good reputation either, which is not great. That's why it was Squarespace, because Squarespace is rather inoffensive, as it were.
Surely Manscaped. Surely that's...
The Down Under Groomer, whatever the hell their product is called. God,
yeah, exactly.
The Manscaper,
Exactly right.
I think is what it's called.
I mean, luckily I'm familiar with This American Life because this feels very much like, and I think they even call Act 2 a love letter to This American Life because they really go into that. And I only knew of them as a radio show. I didn't even know that they had a podcast for a long time. You gotta love Ira Glass and what he's brought to the game. I think he really helped shepherd some of these other things like Serial. And my God, once Serial took off, I know that true crime podcasts existed before that, but it just felt like true crime podcasts took over the industry for a long time after that.
This American Life is interesting. This is definitely the US history of podcasting.
Thank you also for mentioning that, James.
There's no European stuff in there. There's no Australian stuff in there or anything else. And This American Life is one of those shows that has clearly influenced an awful lot of people, and people have made, relatively poor copies of it. You can tell how old the Ira Glass clips are because he is clean shaven. He isn't clean shaven anymore. You can very clearly see that, This American Life has that whole, focus on radio storytelling in the US. I mean, one of the points that was made in it, which I thought was really interesting, is that there is a different ethos. If you're a public radio maker, there is a different ethos. You are there to make something of high quality, to do something great for your audience, whereas the majority of podcasters, the majority of other podcasters, frankly, are there to make money. And there is a different sort of thing that you bring to podcasting if you come from the rather staid, dull US podcast, US public radio industry. You bring a different thing to podcasting than you do if you are a more commercial podcaster. And I thought that was an interesting point that was amplified all the way through this particular thing because, it just made that difference quite clear, I think.
Well, and you can also tell the age of the documentary because China and India are like the biggest podcast markets now, like for most, like in terms of commercial, like that's where a lot of the listeners are. That doesn't even get mentioned in this at all. And I understand why. I mean, James, to your point, is this being made for people that are podcasters? Is this being made for people that want to podcast? Is this being made for people that want to understand? I don't understand who it's being made for. And I think that's both a good thing and a bad thing because at times I feel like the film is grossly unfocused because yes, I understand that there's a history of podcasting, but if a podcaster is watching this movie, I'm not sure I need to learn that. I know like James already mentioned, the basic tenets of what I need to know, but at the same time, it leaves a lot of stuff out that feels important and focuses on things that it's not that it's not important, but those are very, I wouldn't say myopic, but kind of laser focused specific things. This wasn't about podcasting holistically. This is more about specific avenues in podcasting that, I mean, again, you've heard of Serial. I think most people have heard of Serial, This American Life. Those things are mainstream enough, or definitely Joe Rogan at this point. But there doesn't seem to be a lot of information or intent beyond just kind of giving us the most surface level, maybe going a little bit further than a Wikipedia article into the history of podcasting.
What story is it trying to tell? I mean, clearly it's trying to tell Big Ron's story, but Big Ron's story ends with him winning lots of awards, but not necessarily getting the money that he is expecting out of it. There doesn't appear to be an awful lot of story arc there other than Big Ron winning a ton of awards, and that's great. It's an interesting thing. I think the conversation is supposed to be podcasting starts, it's very small, then all of a sudden public radio gets involved, then all of a sudden everybody makes their money, and then all of a sudden everybody goes broke. And it's not quite as simple as that.
We're still podcasting right now. They mention a thing in there that I know we've all talked about privately or in, in our own private circles, but the celebrity of it all. Like you'll notice there's not a lot of that in the movie. They talk about it, but they don't really talk about it. They're just kind of like, well, celebrities got involved and that's where the money came from. And then the celebrities fucked off and then the money left. It's like, that's not actually how it fucking happened. The celebrities are still here now. They have not left. They're not going to leave because that money is there. Like, they know that. At the end of the movie, I was like, are you trying to convince people to get into podcasting by saying that there's room in the space? Because there's always been room in the space. I want to say that there's, I don't know how many podcasts at this point, but it's in the multi-millions, I would assume. Like, the money was never here. Like, Big Ron found that out. Like, we all found that out. We got our own we started our own podcast network. It's not like the money just magically started flowing in. Like,
Get me. I'm giving out wings.
There is a ton of money in the industry, but the ton of money is concentrated on the big shows. And once you're out of the top 50, top 100 shows, which is where all of the money goes to, I've been claiming a number with absolutely no thinking behind it, but I've been claiming a number that 95% of all podcasts out there don't earn money. It's the top
right.
5% who does. Yeah. And most people say, yeah, that sounds about right. I've got no research to back that up, but I think that that's probably fair. So, and looking, we're recording on a day where another part of the gold rush has just killed itself in terms of Wondery. The big purchase from Amazon has just been announced that is closing. Amazon bought that for $300 and something million. And all of a sudden they've gone, yeah, you know what? Yeah, we're just going to close that now. But I think quite a lot of this is the reset of greedy time in podcasting, where all of a sudden we had nothing to spend our money on during the pandemic apart from podcast equipment and podcast stuff. And then all of a sudden now we're seeing the reset of that happening afterwards. We see a bit of the reset of that in this show, a bit of the reset happening in 23, 24, and we're seeing a bit more of that reset now.
It feels odd that there's no mention of the whole Meghan Markle debacle with all of that money that was changing hands. And I don't even know all the details of that. I mean, pretty much I was just following the story through Podnews and just hearing of, oh, yeah, here's all this money and there's no shows that are showing up or very few, and what the heck's going on with this? It just felt almost like it was a little bit of a money laundering scheme for a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about that, but certainly when you look at Spotify, because that was originally a Spotify show, when you look at Spotify, basically the TV people came in with their TV budgets and they assumed that they knew how to make great podcasts. And the secret that nobody has told the TV people is that podcasts don't run in seasons. Podcasts are always on. Podcasts need to be there every single week because a podcast is a habit. I have a particular podcast that I listen to when I'm walking the dog. I have a particular podcast that I listen to when I'm in the supermarket doing the shop. Those are all habitually driven, and you don't all of a sudden, get your way in if you just release 8 shows as part of a new amazing series. It doesn't work that way. And I think that the TV people who came into podcasting didn't understand the difference between how we consume audio and how we consume a TV show. And we're seeing that again right now with a lot of people talking about making podcasting into video and all of this kind of stuff. So
just why? What? Like we can't have one. It can't be enough. What's like? I don't understand. And I think this, and this is just my opinion, nobody else's opinion. It really bothered me that they tried to give credibility to the Ambies, because the Ambies are, in my opinion, what is a problem here. Like when I was at the Ambies, I looked at how the awards were being given out and the people that were nominated, and every single one of those categories was populated with companies that did not need any of that publicity whatsoever. Bloomberg, Forbes, and who the fuck ever. And it's like, look, if you want to pretend like this is a guerrilla industry or an industry that's grassroots, that, like you said, James, people are doing this weekly. There are people that do this weekly, like yourself, people doing things daily for the industry. it's not these kinds of shows that people will listen to this show maybe, but they're not listening to it every week. They're not listening to it every day because there's not enough of it. And they know that because that's not the point. And it's so weird because there was I think Big Ron actually wins it in the movie, the Best Indie Podcaster Award. Like, what does that even mean?
What does that even mean? Yes.
What does that even mean? I just remember sitting in that room watching that award thing going, I'm not nominated. Nobody I know is nominated. Nobody I know who knows anybody is nominated for any of these. And we have a fairly expansive network of people that we know. How is that possible? And then when you see who's nominated, it's because, like you mentioned, James, there's just money was just being dumped into this industry, with wanton abandon.
The idea behind the Ambies is very much supposed to be, it's the Oscars. It's the big, exciting thing. The idea is that you put that show on TV because it's full of people who who are winning awards.
But none of them were there.
That is a very different.
None of them were there.
No. But it's a very different award ceremony too. If you look at the Oscars, and bear in mind my experience in movies, which I've already explained, is not particularly exciting. But if you look at the Oscars, you've got the day before where they give all of the craft awards out, which never makes it to any TV or anything else. And then you've got the TV show with all of the, Conan and all of the fancy stars and everything else. And I think the Ambies is focused very much on the showbiz and on the glitz and on the glamour. Actually, what we need is we need the day before in the Oscars for podcasting as well, to actually recognize a lot of the people behind the microphone, a lot of the production work, a lot of the people that aren't Amy Poehler.
Or the Kelsey brothers who won Best Sports Podcast. That's not the best sports podcast. Like, it's a self-governing body that gives me goosebumps and it causes the hair on the back of my neck to raise. Like, you're a self-governing podcast award body. Okay, it's fine. Like you said, it is the Oscars, and I feel the same way about the Oscars, as I know a lot of people that watch movies do. We don't think the Oscars are the arbiter of any sort of taste at all. They're just, in a lot of ways, the arbiter of... Mike, what is the Oscars the arbiter of? Mainstream movie culture?
But it's a popularity contest most of the time.
Right, and the Ambies felt the exact same way. It's like the Kelsey brothers. Well, wasn't Taylor Swift in the news for, the entire year? She was, so... one of them was involved. I don't know. It's very cynical, but that's got to be kind of hard not to be cynical in this industry, in any creative field, really. I'll just be honest. Let's just be honest here. It's hard not to be. I think anything about podcasting is a positive, though, in the long run. More people are going to see this and hopefully get engaged with podcasting in a substantive way, and that's not a bad thing. That's actually a very positive thing for the industry as a whole, I think, in the long term.
To a degree, but I think what you get out of this is you get out of it that podcasting is a big industry. It's got loads of people working for it. The first thing that Big Ron starts talking about is finding a sound editor, finding, a producer for his shows and everything else. And that is not how the majority of podcasts are put together. I know that I can see on the video.
You're talking to the editor and producer now.
Same thing with
both of us.
Same thing with James. I hear James when he's recording stuff in a freaking airport, and it's like you are recording stuff on the move.
Isn't it nice? It must be nice to have a sound editor and a storyboard person and a story editor, whatever.
If you think that that's what podcasting is all about, then fine. But that's not what the majority of shows are about. And so I think from a point of view of, yes, there are some of these big showbiz things. I think I last calculated, if you look at Fresh Air, which is a podcast and a radio show from NPR, and they interview somebody new every day, every weekday. A bit like Joe Rogan. They have 17 members of staff that get a credit at the end of the podcast. 17 members of staff. And I'm there thinking, what do these people all do? What do they all do?
Send them our way.
Thanks to our web editor and our social media manager. And
This season is edited and mixed by Evan Viola. Our social media research and production assistant is Brendan Whalen. And our logo was designed by Teddy Blanks.
You compare that to, Joe Rogan, I don't think we know how many staff he's got, but I'm guessing it's going to be less than 17. The only people that get the credit is Joe and 2 producers, and that's it. I'm guessing there are a few more, but not that many. And for most people, a podcast, you have to be skilled in researching, in interviewing, in audio editing, in social media, in all of this stuff, because frankly, podcasting doesn't work financially if you start adding sound editors and producers and a social media manager and all of that. That I think is the difficulty that you see over and over again in this movie, is that you see people coming to this with a TV or public radio viewpoint of, this needs 15 people in order to make it work. Whereas actually, financially, much of podcasting only works if you've got 2 or 3 people, or maybe even one person doing that particular show.
That still blows my mind when people ask me, like, who edits your audio? Like, what do you mean who?
At least you edit.
I like the emails that come in and they say, "Hey, James and the Podnews team."
Look around, man. You're looking at him.
I do enjoy occasionally turning around to somebody that's sent me some miserable email and saying, I have fired the person responsible.
They were given short shrift. With something like what they were doing, I understand why they would need a story editor, I guess. But I think, James, you probably, as much as you said you don't watch movies, like what you do podcasting-wise is more in line with what Mike and I do than what Big Ron and the friends of the kind of group, the friend group of these people in this thing that they keep kind of like showing up, or these kind of working friend group, like they're doing something a lot more like specific and narrow focused and like narratively driven. Like that's not what I'm not saying that's not what Mike and I aren't doing. We're not trying to craft a narrative, or you, but like it's a little bit more freeform because it has to be, because we don't have that much time. Like if we're not releasing stuff every week, like we are going to lose our audience. That is what is going to happen. We have to feed the machine. Like we have to. We don't have a choice.
You can't have seasons. You can't have 4 months between shows. There are a few shows that do that, but most of the time that doesn't really work. The thing that I loved in this movie was that brief digression about editing. It was in the middle of Act 2, the This American Life thing. I think it was an introduction to their editor. And just this beautiful piece of work that looked a bit like library clips, explaining what editing is, explaining how editing works. It's only a couple of minutes long. That, to me, was awesome. I mean, that was a great piece of video that I really enjoyed. And I think, this movie has little bits of, genius like that I really enjoyed.
Not to try to rewrite the movie off the cuff, but I kind of would have liked to have seen an episode come together. Like, it's nice seeing Big Ron's journey and hearing more about him, and seeing, clips of his TED Talk and his TRL Live or whatever he was trying to go for with his audition tape, all these kind of things. I'm like, that's kind of cool, but I would almost like to see, how does one episode of one of your shows come together? His little brief thing about, like, a friend asked me if I did a movie review podcast, and so I went to the theater and I saw this and I came up with this thing, and I'm like, okay, how many shows do you have? It's kind of wild, but it's like, I would like to see, like, how do you come up with the subject? Like, they make a mention of the NPR zine when it comes to how I think Ira helped write that, and how he does his stuff. And it's like, yeah, that's fascinating to me. How do you actually come up with the stuff? How do you do your research? How do you do the technical part of it? But again, that's not what this documentary is. This is so much like, sometimes it feels like Big Ron's kind of on the outside, and the rest of it is, here's Paul Tompkins, here's Mark Maron, here's all of these very well-known people, and very well known to me, and I think to a lot of other people too. It's not just some host of a NPR news. I mean, Chad Abendrod, I love him because I'm a huge Radio Lab fan. I don't know if my mom would know who he is. My mom would probably know who Joe Rogan or Mark Maron are.
I think the ultimate disappointment for me with the documentary is that it doesn't touch on the thing that doesn't get talked about enough, which is, if you're doing podcasting, and like James, you mentioned, if you're doing it the way that we've done it, which is the way that most people are doing it, it is very lonely. It is not something that it's like it's so lonely. Like, we're sitting right now talking to each other on Zoom, but I'm ostensibly sitting in an office by myself talking to a computer screen. Like, anyone looking at this would be like, what in God's name am I looking at? And this is expected to be recorded and then edited. And it's like a lot of, especially if you're doing it by yourself and you're editing and doing social media, like that's done by yourself with no one else in the room. Editing is not a group task. Like, promoting is not a group task. Like, doing a lot of the other extraneous things that one has to do to get things out for, whatever platform they're posting their podcast on, like, it's a lot of work and it's done mostly by yourself. And when you turn the recording off, like most of the time you're just left in a room by yourself unless you're recording with people in person, which I have not done a lot of. Most of my recording has been digitally. Like, Mike and I have known each other for damn near 11 years and I've met him once. We have recorded in person 0 times, but we have recorded digitally 100% of the time. And that's hundreds of hours of time. Like, but at the end of the day, like, I've never gotten to hang out with Mike in person and like be friends. We're like working friends. It's like a different thing. And that's something that they just don't really touch on, is like podcasting is very much a community thing, but it's also a very lonely thing. And it's not, again, unless you've got somebody editing your audio for you, like you're sitting and doing all this yourself. Like it's a lot.
And he's there, constantly on the move, talking to people, meeting other people and everything else. That's not really what podcasting is like most of the time. And I think you are absolutely right there. The one thing that the podcast industry has conspicuously failed on for the last 21 years is to complete the feedback loop between the podcast creator and the audience. The only thing that we have as a podcast creator to see whether or not we're doing a good job or not, in the absence of any feedback from the audience, which we don't normally get because it's not built into anything, is by, logging on to our podcast host and looking at some numbers. And that's about as far as we go. And so everybody frets about the, how many 100 downloads have I got for this particular episode? And we don't focus a little bit more on what the audience actually thinks, because all of that isn't built in to the podcast apps that we use. Or if it is, it's built in about 50 separate pubs. And we have to go into each pub to check whether anybody is talking about us. And that simply doesn't work. So it would be lovely if there was a way of fixing that, and a way of making sure that we get feedback from the audience that we have, which, and feedback is always good to hear from our audience, but feedback in a way that actually comes into one place so you know whether you're doing a good job or not. But we don't really, have that. So we are in this sort of very lonely experience quite a lot of the time where, I do a weekly show with a man called Sam, who I have met 3 times. And we've just done episode 250.
It's fucking insane. Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think what the movie is, because quite a lot of it is filmed at places like Podcast Movement and the Ambies and the On Air Fest in Brooklyn and, various other of these big podcast events. I think you get the feeling that podcasting is a very social industry and we all know each other and we all talk to each other all the time. And really, it is a social industry, but we don't have in real life meetings almost ever.
The first time I had ever gone to anything like Podcast Movement was last year, and I'd been podcasting for a decade at that point. Like, yeah, it was that was like kind of a mind-blowing experience for me. And James, I wanted to speak to something else you said. So you said 95% of the podcasts don't make money. Mike, isn't there, I forget what the website is, where you can punch your podcast name in and it shows you like what percentile you're in based on listens? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
Mike's show is in the top less than 1%.
Everybody's show is.
That's the gag.
I mean, if you go to the Buzzsprout website, so Buzzsprout is the number 3 podcast host, and you go to the Buzzsprout website, buzzsprout.com/stats, right at the bottom of that page is something that says episode downloads. And it's for the entire Buzzsprout catalogue, all of the shows which are in there, and there are hundreds of thousands of episodes in there. And it shows you what a typical podcast gets. And for the first 7 days, a typical show on Buzzsprout, if you look at the big list, then you can see that 27 downloads is what the median podcast gets after 7 days. 27 downloads. So as soon as you start talking about 1,000 downloads for an episode after 7 days, you're in the top 5%. And you're in the top 1% if you're doing more than 4,000. We forget, I think, that there are a lot of shows with not very many downloads.
Oh, no, we have a lot of shows that don't have a lot of downloads. We know there's a lot of shows with not a lot of downloads. We work on them. We're making them all the time.
But that's all that we've got to go on because we don't have the feedback. When I used to be on the radio, people would send me things through the post because there was no such thing as email because I am that old. And people would send me things through the post and I would get postcards and things and I would get cards and it would be amazing. And of course, we don't get any of that now. So literally the only thing that we are doing is sitting there going, oh, have I broken the top 10% yet with 450 downloads? That's literally all that we're doing. And I think that's a real shame. But the technical term is cross-app comments. And we are so far away from cross-app comments, sadly.
I just would love a comment. That's why I'm always begging people for ratings and reviews on iTunes. It's like, please just give me any sort of feedback here because I put stuff out and I just never hear anything. But I guess that's just the way it is. I love that meme of the kid eating cereal in front of a picture of these 3 laughing girls. And it says, what it feels like to listen to podcasts, where it's like, I'm there with these people, but they're just a poster and I'm the one eating the cereal.
Yes. Yes. It's a strange thing. But, again, there is that sort of parasocial relationship that you have with the podcasts that you really enjoy. And it's very strange. There are some podcasters out there who I genuinely think are my friends, even though I've never met them.
True. Yeah.
And it's just the way that this stuff works. And I think, quite a lot of the movie talked a lot about making a podcast, but there weren't any listeners. There weren't any people talking about some of the stuff that they had heard. And I think again, that's a bit of a shame. We heard a lot from creators. But it might have been fun. I'm not a film director. I don't watch films. But it might have been fun to have occasionally cut to just people listening to podcasts, doing the dishes, walking out the door, driving.
Well, they've got some stock footage.
Yeah, right.
There's people vacuuming and
there's a woman running at one point with some headphones on. Like, why would we, you think again, like, James, no one listens to anything we do. So who are they going to interview? Who is there to interview if there's it is weird. Again, unrepresented sides of the equation here. Like, I don't understand who the documentary is for in a way. Cause like, it doesn't cover one half of what I think is the half of the big equation here, which is the audience and audience engagement and getting the audience to engage, like begging. I know people listen to my show. Why is it so hard for anybody to write a review? Like, why am I begging you to write a review for my show? Like, again, and it's weird because we don't see the audience in this movie. We just see a bunch of podcasters, which is fine. Makes sense for a podcast documentary.
All right, we're going to take a break and we'll be right back with an interview with the director of Age of Audio, Shaun Michael Colón, right after these brief messages.
Hello, everyone. This is Malcolm McDowell. I just want to say that this is a request to listeners of the Projection Booth podcast to become patrons of the show via patreon.com, patreon.com/projection booth. That's pretty simple. I think you can do that. It's a great show, and Mike, he provides hours of great entertainment. So now it's time to give back, my little droogies. Settle down and take a listen and have a sip of the old Moloko. And then you'll be ready for a little of the old in out, real horror show. Bye-bye.
How did you get interested in filmmaking?
Age of Audio is my second feature. The first documentary we did was called A Fat Wreck, and it's about this punk rock record label. And before I had started that, I was a marketing director for like a talent development school. There's a lot of kids that were trying to be pop stars, and they needed music videos, and the music videos were going outside of the business. So as part of a package, I created a social media package that included the music video so we could keep the quality control inside the house, and basically started doing the music video stuff. And through that, I started doing some editing. Rich kids, by the way, I should mention that. And the third music video I produced was like a $20,000 music video. We hired a production company, red cameras, location, the whole thing. And I produced it. I didn't direct it. I just was making sure everything happened. And the day of the production, there wasn't much to do. So me and my buddy, who's also the cinematographer that I've worked with for a long time, Joel Herrera, was like, hey, why don't we grab some cameras and just interview everybody and do like a little behind the scenes documentary. And at that point, I've done a little live performance editing, but hadn't really edited together anything with a narrative or that kind of thing. And so we did that. We shot it and we put some jokes in it and, really thought about it. And the family was premiering the music video in a little theater. So they'd rent out a theater. And we showed them this thing. It was just an extra thing. It was just a fun little thing we did. They liked it. They're like, hey, can we show this at the screening of the music video? And we're like, well, yeah, sure. And the audio wasn't too great. I don't know how well it was edited, but people seemed to like it and laughed when they were supposed to laugh. And I was like, ooh, I like this feeling. It's cool. I had played in bands for a long time. And one of the things about playing in a band is that you never can experience yourself live because you're playing. But with film, it was like this thing that I made, and then I got to experience it with the audience. So it's kind of this dual feeling of performing, but also watching. So it was really interesting. And when people laughed at the certain parts you want them to laugh at, that was like a really cool feeling. And so after that happened, my cinematographer, Joel, he's also played drums in bands with me, and we were at band practice. And I was like, why don't we do something that we are more interested in, like something that we have a deep passion about? And this is a record label called Fat Records. We're like, hey, no one's ever done a documentary about Fat Records. And this is around the time Netflix was showing a bunch of punk rock documentaries. I was like, no one ever talks about the mid-90s punk rock that we grew up with, so why don't we do something and talk to our friends? And so basically, he had started doing some cinematography stuff, and he was like, here, rent this camera, rent this. And I just went out and started shooting stuff without really knowing much about what I was doing. That eventually led to a crowdfunding thing that we did that was wildly successful, hit 400% of our goal. We were asking for like $7,000. And basically, in the first day, we hit our goal. And I had never really edited anything bigger than this 15-minute little thing. And yeah, so it kind of spiraled, and I ended up doing a trailer, and people liked it. The guy from the label ended up agreeing to be interviewed, and Fat Mike from his band NoFX, if any of your friends are punk rock fans, they might know who NoFX is. And it just kept going. And we ended up doing a documentary called A Fat Wreck. People seemed to like it. And when it was done, it did a bunch of film festivals. It got picked up. It was on, we sold iTunes as well, but then it eventually got picked up and was on Amazon Prime for a few years. We had distribution in Japan, and really it was kind of like the first, I'm doing my second film. I realized that maybe I had success too early, if that makes sense. Because it's really challenging. That's not how it works. It usually doesn't go that quickly and that fast and raise that money that fast. And for it to be, I think we did like 12 film festivals at the time. So it was just like this experience that was really too big for our britches, maybe. Doing that was like, it was really hard. It was way more work than I expected. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done creatively, physically, emotionally, and financially. And I was like, let's do another one. And so that's how it kind of got started. I think I did a couple music videos prior to that, like some basic things. And it really kind of went to the deep end really quickly, and was very lucky in a lot of ways to have something that had a lot of success right away. And I ended up with a sales agent and someone who connected within that space. And the film right now, A Fat Wreck, if anybody's listening, if they want to watch it, it's on Documentary Plus, streaming for free right now. So if you want to watch it, it's available. And then to follow that up, there's a couple other projects. Whenever you finish a documentary, everyone's like, oh, I have an idea for a documentary. I was like, well, that's great. It means a good chunk of my life. That first one took 5 years. And this one came about, we were working on a different documentary that dealt with this band called the Wilhelm Scream. And I ended up interviewing Dallas Taylor. He does a podcast called 20,000 Hertz. If you haven't listened to it, it's amazing. It's all about sound and sound design and just really about the things we hear. It's kind of like This American Life, or 99% Invisible for sound and things that surround that. And we were interviewing him about the sound of Wilhelm Scream. If someone's not familiar, they should go look up a Wilhelm Scream. It's this famous sound that shows up in like Star Wars and Indiana Jones and like I think it's like 300 movies or something crazy like that. I should preface by saying during that filming, it was for this punk rock band, and we ended up filming in Brooklyn. And that night that we were filming, this band that I really like called Propagandhi was playing, and a friend of ours was opening up for them and knew we were filming, so asked us to come film their first set. And I wanted to see Propagandhi, so of course I agreed. And on our way to go to that show, my friend basically was like, hey, my uncle's going to be at the show. I was like, oh, great, I'll get to meet your uncle. And he's like, my uncle's Ira Glass. And so I ended up hanging out with Ira Glass at this punk rock show in Brooklyn. Really a kind of weird worlds combining. I was a big fan of This American Life and Radio Lab and all those things, and thought of that as like NPR and that kind of world, and kind of saw it separate from the punk rock world. And to have those two things in the same space was really, I was like, we're in some kind of weird timeline. I don't know what's going on here. Ended up hanging out with Ira, and it wasn't just like I met him. It was like we ended up hanging out. Like where I chatted with him for a few hours. He was asking us about the movie we were working on. He came to the show of the band we were filming as well. And so it was like this whole evening. And so I got this really interesting experience. And fast forward to me interviewing Dallas, he knew that I knew Roman Mars as well, because Roman Mars had actually done the pull quotes for our first movie on the back of the Blu-ray, because I'd shown him the movie. I figured out he was a punk rock fan and sent him the movie on Twitter. And he sent some nice things back about it. I was like, hey, can I use some of this for the back of the Blu-ray? And so after I'd interviewed Dallas was like, hey, man, you know Ira Glass now, and you know Roman Mars. Why don't you make a podcast documentary? And I was like, you're a jerk, man. Why did you just say that to me out loud? I clearly have to do that. I want to say sometime like January or February of 2018. And I reached out to Roman. I was like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this podcast documentary. If I did, would you be interested in being interviewed? He said, sure, of course. Yeah, I'm down. I think a month or two later, that's in March, I go to South by Southwest. I run into my sales agent, who is also my friend, Jeff Clark. And he's like, what are you working on? He's like, oh, I'm working on this project with this band and about, support systems and all these things. He's like, yeah. I was like, that's cool. He's like, do you have anything else that you're thinking about? He's like, well, I have this idea for this podcast documentary. And I met Ira Glass, and Roman Mars said he would do it. He's like, dude, I could get some money for that. I was like, whoa. And I think the next day was the PRX meetup, Radiotopia PRX. They were doing a meetup, and there was Chris Bannon from, at the time, Stitcher. There's some people there from Stuff You Should Know Network. Julie Shapiro from Radiotopia was there. And basically, I pitched everyone, and I was like, hey, I think I can get the money. Roman said yes. I met Ira Glass and thinking about doing this podcast documentary, and everyone gave me their contact information. We're really excited about it. And I think by May, we were filming some of the first things for the documentary. So it was kind of within a matter of months, we were filming, and that's how Age of Audio started. So it's kind of like this kind of thing. Now, Age of Audio took 7 years. So that starts very challenging to get it over the finish line.
You had a global pandemic in there too, so I can catch you a little slack.
Yeah, that definitely put some speed bumps in there of what we could film. We were able to edit a little bit of what we had filmed, so we actually started filming in earnest in 2019. The day we landed to start filming in New York with Ira Glass, because I reached out to him, he said, yeah, I'll do it. It was the day that Gimlet sold to Spotify for $250 million. And although there had been a few other big acquisitions, that was like 3 to 4 times larger than anything else, and really was kind of like the starting gun of this kind of like rush of money that started swelling into podcasting. So we were in some ways at the right place at the right time with the right project, and we're able to kind of capture some of that moment and talk to those people. I think we did almost like 30 interviews that year, including Kevin Smith and Roman Mars and Jesse Thorne and a host of other people that year. So a lot of the movie was shot in 2019, before the pandemic. Just before the pandemic, I think we were finished. We were going to do another round of interviews as we were heading into 2020. And as we all know, things changed dramatically and couldn't really do a whole lot of in-person interviews at that point.
So how did you go from working with Fat Mike to Big Ron?
Ronald came in the last about year and a half. Through filming the documentary, we had a few other subjects that we had focused on that were independent. I really wanted there to be a aspect of an independent person working on there. Originally, my idea was to follow an independent podcaster and also follow along one of the lower producers or freshman producers at Radiolab and parallel those two. I pitched Radiolab on it, but they declined. I had another subject that I worked with. Over the course of 7 years, things change and ideas change and where people are changed. I had a couple subjects drop out. And in 2023, the film was kind of floundering. It didn't feel like it was going anywhere and the momentum had gone. I was really worried that we would be in a situation where the film would fall apart. At that point, we applied for some grants, got some more stuff edited, and I was really gearing up to do a crowdfunding thing because I was like, we'd keep things moving. Lo and behold, we submitted, I think it was in April, and then in August, I found out that we had gotten the Austin Film Society grant. It was about $10,000. It wasn't enough to complete the film by any means, but it breathed a lot of new life into the project. And when that happened, I reached out to the subjects that they'd been working with for about 2 years. And the film had kind of gone dormant for about 6 months. I reached out and they're like, hey, we're in a different place and we're not really interested, which is incredibly disheartening. However, it was actually probably the best thing that could have possibly happened. Because what happens is I get the grant, I use it to actually buy a computer I can edit on. My other computer was almost 10 years old. I could barely edit on it. I was able to get something I could really start editing on. And then I used a little bit of it to go to a podcast conference called Resonate, which was, I think, doing their second year. And I reached out to Chioki from Resonate and was basically like, hey, I'm working on this documentary. I would love to come to the festival. I just really can't afford the passes. I would love to be, they have like a scholarship program. So I asked to be a part of the scholarship. And my thinking was if I got the scholarship, I would definitely go and I could use a little bit of that grant money to pay for the hotel and the flights. And so I ended up going to Resonate. So my idea was I want to get some allies or some momentum going about the crowdfunding thing I'm about to do. So I really go there and talk about the movie and see if I can get people interested in what I was working on. And the film had kind of been around for a time, so some people knew about it and kind of knew about its production that were there. And I ended up running into Ellen Horn, who was actually on the team that helped create Radiolab and is also a NYU professor, and she handles the podcast studies and audio storytelling. And it was on the last night of Resonate, she was like, hey, I heard about your project. How can I help? And really wanted to participate in a high level. So we had a really great time chatting, and she really came up on board on the project at that point as a producer and a story editor. But a little bit prior to that, I had started hearing about Ronald Young Jr. There had been some people in the film that had worked with him. I had seen him pop up. And when we were shifting to a new subject on our website, I had put basically like, hey, if you're an independent podcaster, please reach out. We're looking for someone to work with that'd be a part of the film. And very honored to have a lot of people submit their story and their podcasts and things about being independent creators. But one of the names that when I was looking at the list was Ronald Young Jr. It really struck out to me. It's like, hey, this guy's having, I've heard a lot about this guy lately, and he's would be willing to participate in the film. So I reached out to Ronald, and Ronald's really cool guy, we jived right away. And I was like, hey, I'm interested in chatting with you. I'm going to, I'll be at Resonate. Were you going to be there? He's like, dude, I live basically where I live. Like that's the college he went to. Like he's part of that. So he's like, I'm going to be there. So I was like, okay, well, that's a good sign. So basically, he wanted to be a part of it, and we met. And then I think with the addition of Ellen coming aboard, that really is what got the movie over the finish line. From that point, I think that December of 23 leading into 24, I had gotten a little bit of money from the crowdfunding. It wasn't overly successful, but due to all the outpouring of marketing that I did for the crowdfunding, a production company reached out. I got connected with, I should say. They're now called Substance, and they were like, hey, we're interested. What do you need? We have production facilities. It's like, dude, I really need money. I need money so I can edit the movie. And I had Amy Grumbling, who actually did the grant writing for that and helped with the grant writing. We collaborated, but she's the one who really kind of put down the first things and really was a big part of that grant side. Basically, I had been paying her out of pocket, but at a certain point, the self-funding reached a limit. But basically, they were like, hey, so yeah, how much do you need? And I was like, I told them a number. They were willing to come pretty close to it and also offer services. And also they're filmmakers as well. They do a lot of commercial work, but they came on to be a co-production partner where they're not just giving me money, but they're actually invested in the film in a lot of different ways of the success of the film. And really from that point in 24 is when we went and filmed with Mark Maron. That's when we went to the Ambies. We went out to On Air Fest and followed Ronald and got a lot of the Cinema Verite stuff. Prior to that, a lot of the stuff was really just talking head, and I really wanted it to be a mix of the two. And we were able to really kind of catch Ronald as he was kind of on this big upswing. In December, end of December, after he had agreed to be part of the film, he had been on the list for the New York Times Best Podcast. I think a few other lists that I'm forgetting right now. I think Vulture as well, and was top independent podcaster to watch and had been nominated for the Ambies. So we really had this opportunity to catch him in this moment where a lot of things were happening that we could capture. So it was really lucky that those other subjects dropped out, because the stuff we had captured with them was really kind of them at their house, maybe them doing some production meetings, but really wasn't as dynamic, I think, as what we were able to capture with Ronald, including being at the Ambies when he swept, spoiler alert, when he sweeps the Ambies, and we're there to capture those moments. And you've seen the film. The film is not about him necessarily. It's not about winning the Ambies. The film is really about what does it take to be an independent creator and the struggles that entails and the commitment and the juxtaposition between acclaim and financial well-being, as I think most independent artists can probably sympathize with. But as well as like a history lesson on where podcasting came from. We try to highlight some of the, I think we can't highlight everything that's important that's happened in podcasting, but I think we were able to highlight some of the really big moments that kind of broke through into the mainstream that most people may have heard about. The film is really, one of the goals is to show podcasting as an art form and as something to be respected in the same way as film or novels or television or any kind of art form that people put time into and love and have a passion for, as you probably know, Mike.
Yeah, no, it's a really fascinating mix of those stories. And then to have Ron be your narrator, for so much of it really injects him into the story a lot earlier. There you go.
I'd even push back on that terminology. Consider him to be the host. Now, the first documentary we did about Fat Records, it's fast, it's grungy, it's got a lot of like energy to it, and because it was really the production, a lot of it had to do with being scrappy and filming on different cameras and all this kind of stuff. But we leaned into that and made it where it kind of represented what you kind of get the feel of a punk rock album. It's short, has that kind of frantic energy. It's especially that kind of punk rock that we were trying to give a feeling of. And with this film, one of the great things about having Ellen come on was that she's a storyteller and worked with narrative production, storytelling. And we really wanted to introduce those elements into the film. So it's not the structure and a lot of the production, the sound design, and even some of the choices we made were more in line as like, we wanted it to feel like it could be an episode of This American Life, or at least sections of it, or it would feel like a narrative podcast, because that's a lot of what the storytelling we're talking about. So that if we did our jobs right, and I hope we did, it should feel different than a regular documentary. It should feel a little bit like if someone is a fan of narrative podcasting, you're getting that self-aware host that's not just a narrator, but they're commenting on the things happening in the film, but also they're guiding you in a lot of the same ways a host would guide you in an audio-only narrative podcast. So it was really built as a hybrid between those two kind of philosophies. There's a lot of things that you wouldn't necessarily do in a traditional documentary that we did, and hopefully an attempt to create something that felt a little different and kind of honored a little bit of the kind of production that we were trying to represent.
Well, not only does the movie sound like $1 million, but it looks like $1 million. Just the cinematography and the quality of the images, it looks fantastic.
Oh my gosh. I think it's one of those things when you work on something so closely, like it's hard to have perspective on it anymore. So I'm really glad to hear you say that. I hope that was one of our goals, is we wanted to bring cinematic qualities to the production and have something that was high quality, and I'm so glad to hear you say it.
You use a technique too, which I found interesting. There were certain shots that felt a little like stock shot, stuff you would buy. But then as I'm watching it, I'm like, no, I think they shot these for the film, because those kind of comment on what's going on in the movie as well.
There's definitely a mix. There's stuff that we shot, definitely, but there were just things that might have been impossible to shoot. So we tried to find things that kind of felt like that. So I don't know if I'm telling too much, but we used some stock footage in there. But we also did things where we shot stuff ourselves to mix in so it felt blended, and it gave that appearance that you hopefully couldn't tell. The stuff that we shot versus what we did, because we did use some city shots and people running and things like that. But we try to be thoughtful about what we're using and how it looked, and did it match the vibe of all the other things we were trying to do. One other thing that we did, and I was a little nervous about this, we did our premiere at the Oak Cliff Film Festival, and that was really the first time I got to see it on a real big screen. And one of the things that we did, which is kind of breaking a little bit of a rule in really a film, is there's a lot of close-ups. It's a close and like an extreme close-up, rather than what would be in film terminology, like a mid-shot and a close-up. I didn't want to do the thing where you saw the person sitting in the chair and it's nice background and very Netflixy kind of thing, which is gorgeous. I'm not putting that down by any means, but early on with my cinematographer, I was like, I think we should do something close and closer so we can visually represent the intimacy of podcasting. They're in your ear. And I really wanted it to be kind of mouth and ear. That's where a lot of the close-ups are. They're like mouth and ear. The thought being we're trying to visually give a sense of closeness with the subjects. I got a little pushback from my cinematographer because, like I said, we're breaking a rule, which could make people uncomfortable. That's one of the dangers of doing something that close for that period of time. But I also felt like what we would do is eventually make it so you're not that close all the time. even with Ronald, we do a lot of really close stuff with Ronald, like super close, where it's like really just his mouth and the microphone and maybe the side of his face, but you're not really seeing his eyes as much. You're really just seeing his mouth talking. And that was also a little bit of a risk, but the feedback that I've gotten so far, the people like it, and they felt like it was a cool choice, and it creates a visual language for the film that I hope translates well. Like I said, when you're deep in the thick of it for 7 years, I just get used to seeing it, so I don't know how it feels to someone new. But it seemed to work, I think, for what we're doing, and also hopefully make something that doesn't feel like something you've seen over and over again. Nothing wrong with that, but I wanted to have that little differentiation. It's a risk. Everything's a risk, hopefully it works.
You get so sick of just seeing white guys in suits looking off into the middle distance, talking to somebody that you don't even know who they are because the cameraman's over here and they're looking over there. And you're just like, can you look at me? So that you lose that intimacy. But yeah, getting those nice shots of Ron's mouth, I'm just like, oh yeah, that's really nice. And then even when it comes to some of the other close-ups that you're doing, it feels like Ira is talking to me. It feels like these people are talking to me rather than just to the director.
Yeah, and then we have a few moments where, because we do a little bit of the off-center thing, but we have a few moments where people will look into the camera right down the barrel, and it's used for comedic effect, and I hope it's funny. That's one of the goals. Especially early on in the film, we're trying to set up how this technology came to be. And the important part isn't necessarily the technology. The important part is the fact that this technology allowed anyone to do it. We felt like it was important to have an understanding, at least at some cursory level, for people to understand, like, oh, this kind of code that these people did allowed for anyone to make this, that no one controls it. Now, nowadays there's a lot more money into it, but right now anyone can start a podcast. And this was before YouTube. Anyone can do a YouTube now, anyone can do a TikTok now, and I think that's a wonderful thing. I think that's a really cool thing. But podcasting was kind of one of that first thing that you could make and distribute all over the internet and didn't have to pay anyone. There was no advertising. You weren't enriching another platform at the time. It was platformless. You just had to have people subscribe to this little bit of code. And we had it much longer in the film at one point, but people were like, it's too much technical. But I really pushed back when we were trying to, do we need to even talk about RSS? It's like, I think we do. I think people, even if we need to, it's just a basic level without being too boring. How can we make this fun? And it also explained, like, this little piece of code really allowed for anyone's voice to be heard over the internet. And I think that allows for independent creators to exist because a platform doesn't own RSS. And even though I would say RSS has its limitations, and there's podcasting 2.0, and there's these technologies but they're not as widespread, RSS still is what the backbone of what's going on. And even though YouTube is the number one place people listen to podcasts, what did they do? They ended up integrating RSS into their thing eventually. And I think there's something to be said about that open nature. Someone doesn't want to go on Spotify. If someone doesn't want to go on YouTube, if someone doesn't want to give money to TikTok for whatever reason, and I'm not suggesting they do, I'm just saying if they want to, you can still put out a podcast via RSS and have it distributed all over. So I think that's the thing. And like I said, we don't try to, in the film, try to make it just about that. We want there to be the technical, but also the emotional. And what did that allow? What's the point of talking about RSS? And I think hopefully by going through Ronald's journey, there you can see what that allowed for someone to just say, hey, I want to do this, and just start doing it. Man, it was very rewarding. It's also, to get to that point was extremely intense. As you are heading toward a world premiere, there's so much work that has to happen. And it was really hard to enjoy it fully because it was so intense getting to that point. Like a couple months of just thousands of hours of work and really just being so close to it. I was able to enjoy it, but I'm hoping as I get to see it with other audiences, now that pressure of the first one is gone, that I can enjoy it without having that tension, and worrying about like, oh, is there going to be a black frame in there? Is there going to be an audio cutout, or what did I miss? Because leading up to that screening, it was to get it over the finish line. We were just really working on it up until the last minute, which tends to be how I operate, unfortunately. Having that deadline really pushes you to really lock in. But now, subsequent screenings, we're hoping to do some screenings here coming up. It's looking like we're going to have a big one at some of the podcast conferences coming up. I don't want to say too much until I know 100%, but things are in process for some of the bigger podcast conferences. I'm being vague on purpose. But I think the next screening we get to do, I'll get to really enjoy it, because I think it'll be to our core audience, which are, I think it's a love letter to podcasters, to be honest with you. I've had some feedback from some people that are podcasters, specifically Dallas Taylor and some other people that I've heard from, saying that they felt really seen by the documentary, that they like, oh, this is the struggle of doing this, and showing not just the front end of the podcast, showing a little bit of what it takes to make it happen, and the kind of dedication and the kind of commitment to doing that kind of work, which I have a tremendous respect for podcasters. I mean, after doing this, because at least when I was making the movie, I'm doing it behind the scenes. It took 7 years, but I'm not presenting what I'm doing every day or every week or every other day, or depending on your cadence of your podcast. And I can stop. I could stop for a couple months at a time to try and raise money or do whatever I needed to do, but I wasn't committed to publishing something every week, every day. That's a huge commitment. That's why I have a lot of respect for YouTubers as well, and anyone who's showing up every week, every day. That is a different kind of thing, because I get to, as a documentarian, I work on my thing till I felt it was ready. And that's just not the case if you're a podcaster. It has to go out that next week. You have a deadline, and if you miss that deadline, no one's going to punish you, but you're going to have a drop off in audience, because if you're doing something every week or once a month or whatever that cadence is, your audience that you've built up, they're expecting that. And if you've done a good job, it's become part of their life. And if you don't show up that first week, that second week, it's very easy for someone to go to something else. Not because they're mad at you, just because they're going to fill that space with something. And you have to show up over and over again. And I have a big respect for that.
It's kind of nice. You not only can show stuff at podcast festivals, but then also film festivals as well, which is great to have the two forums there for you.
My thinking, and I think podcasting is really, when we started, podcasting was becoming mainstream for sure. But I think now isn't necessarily convincing someone why they should listen to a podcast. I think the film should show why you should respect the people that are doing this. And like the joke that everyone has a podcast. I mean, ha ha ha, funny. Yeah, but the people who really do it and take it seriously, it's an art form to be respected. It's something that people shouldn't take for granted. If their favorite podcaster, if they can see what it takes to do this, maybe they're like, hey, maybe I should contribute to that Patreon.
From your mouth to their ears.
I mean, I like in the film, like, I don't want to spoil too much, but we have the host drop his Patreon in the film. And when we were recording Ronald's parts, he was like, no, drop your Patreon. We're talking about Patreon. You should drop your Patreon, because that's what a podcaster would do. If they're talking about Patreon, they would mention that they have a Patreon. It's like, and we should show that. Like, we should show that kind of thing. One of the other things we do in the film is we have a host-read ad where the host turns to camera and basically stops what he's doing and does an ad, basically, which we wanted to include that because we wanted to have that kind of feeling like, oh, okay, yeah, this is like a host. That's when I say he's not a narrator as much as a host. He's active within the film.
So, Shaun, where's the best place for people to keep up with the movie and where it's showing?
AOAmovie.com is our website, which, to be honest with you, just really takes you to our Instagram for now. I have a website that'll be going up here in the next week or so. That'll have some of the press that we've gotten and links to all those kind of things in the trailer. But if you go to our Instagram there are the links to the trailer, and you'll be able to see what's going on. We've been a little dormant since the screening, as there's kind of things happening in the background. There's people we're talking to. But I think through August and going forward, you'll probably see a lot more stuff that is going to be happening. Also, to be honest with you, leading up to the premiere, it was so intense that I needed a chance to step back a little bit. And we have a new poster that's going to be coming out. We have a really, really great poster that we worked with an amazing artist with that really kind of leans into our current poster is our art poster, which is very metaphorical and artsy. But this other one really kind of leans into the podcast side of it all and has a more familiar thing that people might recognize and really kind of speaks to some of the content of the film as far as a little, you'll see it. It has an iPod in it, basically. And it really leans into that kind of side of it, and excited people see that. Yeah, AOA movie. If that's our Instagram, that's our TikTok, that's our X/Twitter. Not super active on there, but we still have a account there. And if you go to AOA movie, for now, it'll go to Instagram, but eventually in the next couple of weeks, it'll probably lead to a website that has more content on it. You can follow where the film is going. We will be announcing some of the podcast conferences that we're going to be at. We're trying to be at the place where podcasters are. Film festivals are great and really want to be at as many film festivals as possible. But I think our core audience, the people who I think are really going to be the first people to really appreciate the film, are going to be podcasters. And so we want them to have a chance to see it. So we'll probably be at some pretty big podcast conferences coming up. I'm hesitant to announce anything till everything's fully locked in, but I would say with a lot of confidence that we'll be at some of the ones that you would imagine we would be at. And also, I'll say, reach out. If anyone's listening, reach out. If you want to set up a screening, we are open to that. We're trying to take that into account because we really want to reach out to casters and people interested in the space and have them be able to see the film and talk about it. Because I think that podcasters specifically, if we did our job right, will feel like they're being honored, they're being seen, that this is a film that is for them, but done in a way that can bring everyone in to see what they do.
Well, Shaun, thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for the honor of being able to watch. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Mike, I really appreciate you giving me the time to talk about the movie. I also appreciate the kind things you said about how it looks. As a filmmaker, I'm hoping that it translates the thing that I wanted to, and I hope the quality comes across. But as a filmmaker, you see all the flaws. So it's great to hear from a perspective that you enjoyed the film, but also felt like it's a high enough quality that we are shooting for.
Oh, definitely. Well, I hope we can talk again, and hopefully maybe less than 7 years or so.
What we're hoping to do is, if the film really connects with people, we have a lot of stuff that isn't in the film. We did an hour and 22-minute movie. It's really short. We try to make it really digestible, and that's with credits. So there's so much content of people we talked with that is not in the film. I would hope that we might be able to tell the stories of some other podcasters as well. So it's not just limited to the film. Hopefully it may become a thing that we expand beyond just the film. Maybe a podcast. Maybe an Age of Audio podcast sounds cool. Or something on YouTube that shows a little bit more and we can bring in people. So yeah, I'm hoping that if it really connects with people, we can expand it into something that's a little bit more than just a film, and really just kind of a movement that is centered around the celebration of what makes this medium great.
Well, thank you so much, sir. This was such a pleasure talking with you.
All right, Mike. Appreciate you, man.
All right, we are back, and we're talking about Age of Audio, and one guy who gets a lot of spotlight in this is Kevin Smith. And Kevin Smith really took to podcasting, so much so that what was it, Chris? He was kind of riffing. Was it with Scott Mosier or people on his show?
Where was that discussion that Smodcast had effectively the first movie based on a podcast, because Tusk came out of that podcast episode where they were talking about that listing for the guy who wanted a roommate, but, dress up like a walrus, and then, walrus yes, walrus us know, like, where was that? Like, that's, I mean, again, like, because movie podcasts don't exist. That's why.
Well, Kevin Smith exists. He's definitely
But it's
in
not
there.
a movie
Katrina Longworth doesn't exist. But
it's not a movie podcast,
true.
I guess. Like, Smodcast, I think, is just like a broadly like a pop culture discussion podcast with Kevin Smith.
I've never listened to an episode. I've heard enough Kevin Smith that I don't need to listen to much more of him. I mean, it just feels like it would be a broadcast to me, where it's like, yeah, let's talk about smoking weed and how much I love my wife's taint, like those kind of things. I don't really need that. So, yeah. And when Tusk came out, I was just like, what the fuck is this?
Movie based on a podcast.
Yeah, and it's interesting to talk about how, they talk about how podcasts are reflected via Saturday Night Live, but they didn't really go into, like, for me, I'm not that familiar with Serial, but I'm familiar with Serial insofar as the parodies of Serial. Not that SNL skit, but I remember there being like I don't even remember if it was a YouTube thing or what it was, but it was basically like living the life of Sarah Koenig and this whole thing of like different pronunciations of MailChimp and that whole MailKimp thing that they were doing, which I never understood that shit. But it is fascinating for me because I'm always interested in how things are reflected back through pop culture. So yeah, things like Tusk was fascinating insofar as it was about a podcaster, Only Murders in the Building. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Godzilla series, like King of the, well, I know you're not, James, but King of the Monsters and Godzilla X Kong. There is a character in there who is a conspiracy theorist podcaster.
Hello, loyal listeners. Welcome to TTP, Titan Truth Podcast, episode number 245. Today is the day. Maybe the last podcast I ever record. And look, I know I said that last week, and yeah, maybe the week before and a few other times, but look, this is the point. After 5 years of deep cover at Apex Cybernetics, I'm finally taking my shot. Something bad is going on here. I don't know what it is, but I'm about to walk in and download hard evidence and expose a vast corporate conspiracy. And yeah, you can call me a whistleblower, but I ain't just whistling. I mean, this is more than a leak. It's a flood. And believe me, this flood is gonna wash away all Apex's lies. You can believe that.
It used to be funny for me, but then watching it now and in the age of, QAnon and all these things, not very funny, even if he's right that there are giant monsters. But there are things in the one with, Russell from, Deadpool, that one where he showed up, where they're talking about like using bleach to clean yourself and all this stuff. And I'm like,
this is the part I was telling you about.
I don't even know you've been marked. 1 or 2 gallons won't cut it. I need my bleach in bulk because spy test is real, people. I mean, come on, invisible to the naked eye.
That's how we find him. The bleach.
Bleach?
He consumes a ton of bleach.
He drinks bleach.
Showers with it.
Oh, yeah, I shower with bleach. No, what?
Prevention against organic tracking technology. See?
That podcast is filling your head with garbage.
And it just makes podcasters look awful. It makes us look like we're absolute nutcases, which a lot of us are.
The beginning of the Halloween reboot, the David Gordon Green movie, they're like true crime podcasters that go, to bother Michael Myers and then bother Jamie Lee Curtis, and then they get fucking murdered, because again, like they're being portrayed as obnoxious. And look, like Mike said, I know plenty of obnoxious podcasters.
I remember when Only Murders in the Building came out, and I was very snooty about it because it's not a great portrayal of either podcasters or podcast fans in that show. I have watched a few. It's almost as if the skits that we see in SNL, the skits that we see in Only Murders in the Building, and other things about podcasting, and of course, Joe Rogan and all that kind of stuff, don't paint podcasting in the best light that we possibly could, and that seems to be a bit of a shame. What I found interesting is in September last year, Only Murders in the Building came back for a 4th season, and so the Wirecutter site actually went through all of the audio equipment that they used to make their podcast, and guess what? It's all chosen for looks. There is no. You do not want to buy any of the stuff that you see them using, of course, because it's a TV, it's a pastiche, it's a comedy show, and that's kind of how it should be. But it doesn't necessarily paint us in a particularly good light, and particularly when you then have a look at, what is the main sort of view that most humans have of podcasters? It's either true crime weirdos, or it's people like Joe Rogan, which is not a good view either, or Bill Simmons, or whoever that might be.
Well, what did Bill Simmons do to anybody, James?
And then you've got people like Ira Glass or Guy Raz, people that will be comfortable wearing a bow tie. And you've got those 3 sets of people. And I don't think, being fair, either of those people necessarily paint podcasting in the light that we would like it to be painted in, which, it all looks a little bit weird from my point of view.
I mean, the joke that I always make about podcasting is it's just 3 white dudes in a room bitching all the time. And we're here. The equation, here we are.
You've spoken into existence.
And I actually appreciate that the movie doesn't focus on like a white content creator. Like, I appreciate that. Like, it's a lot of POC, a lot of women as well. Like, I like that. Yes, there are plenty white dudes in the podcasting sphere. Like, if not, most of these hyper successful podcasters are just white men or women. Like, we've mentioned Joe Rogan, we mentioned Katrina Longworth, like the last podcast on the left guys, Bill Simmons, like they all have one thing in common. Again, like they can't help that. It is what it is, but like it is kind of a deserved stereotype, but an unfair one, because I think a lot of people, I would say probably the 3 of us, bristle at that being the case, because it makes me uncomfortable, because I would never want anyone to think like I'm an exclusionary content creator, I'm involved in an industry that's exclusionary, because if anything, with Weirding Way, like we try to be inclusionary, if not go out of our way to make sure that people are included, because like we've already mentioned, this industry can't get by on the 5% alone. It just can't. Or whatever the number is, probably even smaller than that, frankly.
I was appreciative that there were, like you said, people of color. I very much make a point when it comes to like setting up the schedule for next year's shows and those kind of things. It's like, okay, let's get some different voices on here. It can't just be white guys all the time. I mean, especially when it comes to like movies, everybody loves movies, except for James. Everybody loves movies. So it's like, let's get all these different points of view. Movies are made for so many different people, and watching them, you can come to things with different perspectives. So I thought that was good that there were a lot of different, not a lot of different, but some different perspectives in this film.
Yeah, there are some. I would say if you watch the trailer, you will get the wrong impression, because the trailer is almost all white blokes. But as long as you actually watch the movie, I think it's very clear, that there are a lot of great women who've been involved in podcasting all the way through its history. That's not reflected in the trailer, and I think that's a bit of a mistake.
Yeah, I would have liked to have heard from Brooke Gladstone as much as Ira Glass. I think that she brings a lot to the table. I mentioned Katrina Longworth. Like, she is, as far as I know, the most popular movie podcaster out there. Again, amazing production values, stuff that I'll never be able to attain, that's for sure. But yeah, I mean, she's knocking it out of the park. She's also seasonal. So I know, because people will come to me when a new season starts and say, oh, have you heard the new season? Yeah. Have you listened to my show? No. Okay, that's fine.
Why are you asking me if I listen to other people's podcasts? That's a weird question to ask, man.
Yeah. I do try. But yeah, people are always recommending shows, and I'm just like, I'm sorry, I can't. I'm too busy doing my own thing. Not only are podcasters portrayed in different media, but then also you've got the idea of TV shows or movies being based, kind of like Tusk, but being based off of podcasts, which is also an interesting thing for me, where it's like, how do you adapt a podcast to a movie or a TV show? But they're doing it.
Well, if you do something like Lore, it's very easy. I mean, when I think of podcasts being adapted into things, I think of Lore other than Tusk. And like Lore, I mean, I think they did a great job with Lore, but it was one of those things where I was like, wow, how are you going to do that? But again, with the format of his show, it made perfect sense. Like almost again, like people were probably like, why isn't this a YouTube video? Like, well, because it's a Amazon Prime thing instead, you know. Now there's no point anymore. Like just do it on YouTube.
The most successful company for taking podcasts into movies and into TV is Wondery. But they have done a really good job of taking some of their shows, both translating them into other languages and doing that properly, but also turning, you know, I mean, Dr. Death was, made into a great TV show. Lots of other of their shows have been made into great TV shows as well. And I think, you know, there was thankfully not much talk about podcasting going into video on this movie, and I'm pleased about that. That's one of the things that concerns me an awful lot about where this industry is going. But very clearly, you could see that Serial being made into a TV show, that's called a documentary, and we have those. Whereas Joe Rogan it's just two people talking, and it's very easy and cheap to put cameras in there, and hey presto, you've made some video out of it.
If I was a video content creator, I'd be more upset that video podcasts are cutting into what I do than the other way around.
I love hearing James on his show when he's talking about what is a podcast. You know, that's still a debate. There are a lot of videos that I watch or video shows that I watch where I guess they would be reclassified as podcasts now, like comic tropes. I love comic tropes a lot. It's a guy talking about comics, and occasionally he cuts away to panels and shows things that way. But the majority of it is kind of like how I'm looking at you guys right now, a dude in front of a microphone. Well, I guess you would call that a podcast. I remember the Red Letter Media guys going freaking apeshit a few years ago when William Shatner's people reached out and said that he will not do your podcast. And they're like, we're not a podcast. Bye. And I'm like, well, kind of. Like these days, I bet you that's what YouTube would put you in as.
Well, I'm looking forward to going to Podcast Movement in a few weeks. I've got some stickers, and the stickers that I've got are all very fancy, and they say something for your ears when your eyes are busy. That's what a podcast is. It's something for your ears when your eyes are busy. It might have some video attached to it. That's absolutely fine. Go gangbusters on that. But if it doesn't work in audio form, it is not a podcast. And the thing that is concerning me an awful lot is listening to shows where you suddenly realize, oh, this is just audio from a TV show, really, isn't it? And they keep on saying, have a look at this. Isn't this amazing? Well, I can't have a look at it because I'm just listening to the podcast. And I now feel like a second-class citizen because, you know, you've foisted me off on something that doesn't work as a piece of audio. So I think we just have to be very careful, you know, in terms of that as we move forward. Thankfully, they didn't dive too deeply into that in this particular movie, which was probably a good thing.
It's a very positive movie. Like it doesn't talk about like, I don't know, like not the dirty side of podcasting, but there's a little bit of like a less exciting part of this to talk about, like the stuff that we've dealt with, like the things that you deal with hosting sites and not, you know, people not being upfront and honest with things, or just, you know, running into creative differences with people, like all kinds of things. Like none of that's mentioned. Like this seems like a very fun and upbeat thing. Like, look, I think they said it best in the documentary. Podcasting right now is like the last frontier, of like ultimate democratization of media is podcasting. Like literally anybody can do it. Like, and as long as that continues to be the case, that is a positive. But to your point, James, like the idea that like somehow now we all have to have video. Like when I came back from Podcast Movement last year, Mike and I had a conversation, and one of the things I talked about was like, this is all video now. They all want video, and they wouldn't shut the fuck up about video all the time. I did a video podcast for a while. It was fine, but I would rather just do this. This is what I signed up for. This is what I want to do. And this will always have a place. It's just figuring out a way to make this more accessible. And I think as something like this documentary would show, my hope is that something like that makes this more accessible. And something like Podcast Movement, which I am also going to in like a week and a half, goes a long way to that, I think, in getting people engaged and directly engaged, but it's whether or not those people leave that box that they're in, because it's not about, like you said, the echo chamber that we're all in of like, podcasting's great and I love podcasting. Like, yeah, you fucking listen to podcasts. Like, how do I get the person that isn't already on that train onto the train with me for as little cost as possible? And we, as a collective industry, still haven't figured that out. We haven't. And I don't know what that looks like or what that takes, because if I did, trust me, I'd be doing it right now and I'd be sharing it with the people I work with directly so we could all be successful. Like, I wouldn't keep it from people either, because that's how the other industries became the way that they are as well.
Yeah, correct. And it's one of the reasons why I am much less interested in seeing, 53% of the US population listens to podcasts every month. That to me is not an exciting number anymore. The exciting number for me is 773 million hours in the US is spent with podcasts every week. 773 million hours. Now, if we double that, theoretically, we double the amount of money coming into the industry. It's not that easy, but theoretically, at least, this is a number which is tied into the revenue that we can earn. And it's that number, 773 million, that we should be having a look at every single year. It should go up every single year, you would hope. But certainly seeing that going up as our bellwether. And one of the ways that we can increase that is to cross-promote other podcasts, to make sure that people find new shows that they're interested in, but also listen longer to the shows that they really enjoy, and do all of that stuff. I mean, it's the usual way that commercial radio works, but we don't seem to have focused on time spent listening in the podcast industry at all. The only thing that we've been chasing is how many people, there's the useless stat, how many people have ever listened to a podcast? I mean, I don't know about you, Mike. I have stood using, with bare feet, I have stood on a Lego brick, and that really hurts, and I'm not going to do it again. But I'm still in that list of people who have stood on a Lego brick with their bare feet. That's not a particularly useful stat, but 773 million hours spent with podcasts every week in the US alone is an amazing stat. And as long as we focus on that and continue to grow that number, I think we're in for a great future in terms of where the industry is going.
Some of my episodes are so long that I think I'm at least 1% of that number.
Well, that's the other thing that's nice about podcasting is it sticks around forever. We are the arbiters of that. We have all of our own files. We have everything. We can move our stuff. They don't talk about it in the documentary of like the hosting debacle. And, Kevin Smith talks about like, well, I had to pay for podcasting. Like, no shit, dude. We've been having to pay for it this whole time. Like, it's nice that you thought it was free though, my friend. Like, how much is that dozen bananas? $13? Yeah, sure. Just give me the $13. I love that is part of this, that we are the arbiters of our own fate in a way. Like, and that's kind of on us, like, as not figuring out how to do this. But at the same time, like, I'm kind of okay with that, because I think as an industry, I would rather be in a group of people feeling like we can still do better and there's still room to grow than there is no room for anyone like us. We're trying to like dig out and carve out our spot here, as opposed to like there's plenty of room for everybody. And podcasting still feels that way. Like, I've only been doing it for a decade. It's been around for twice as long as I've been doing it. And there's still plenty of there's still so much room to cover. And I think that the documentary does get at that a little bit, but I think that's another like huge thing that needs to kind of just be like yelled at the mountaintop, is like, there is actually room for everybody in this, and you can be successful.
There is room, and I think, Chris, you were saying earlier how many podcasts there are. There are 4.7 million podcasts, and that sounds, oh my goodness, unattainable. But you look at two things. You look at the amount of books that are published every single year, way more than 4.7 million. But you also look at the amount of active podcasts that are being made right now, and that number is as low as 300,000. That's the number that you're really competing with if you're competing with an always-on show. And I think from that point of view, there's plenty of room. And the benefit of podcasting, it's called podcasting for a reason and not broadcasting, because the benefit is you can really talk to people with a common interest. You don't have to be broad. You don't have to reach millions of people. You can focus on, the 10 people in the world who like blue trains and make a blue trains podcast. You can do that, and you can have 100% reach in the people who love blue trains. I mean, that's what podcasting can do. And that podcast can sit on the same platform next to Joe Rogan, next to Amy Poehler, next to This American Life. And that's really exciting. And that's something that you can't do in terms of Netflix. You can't really do in terms of YouTube because of the way that the algorithms and all of that work, and the cost of doing video in the first place. But you can do that in terms of podcasting. And that's what I still think that podcasting is one of the most exciting media, because, at the end of the day, you can do that and you can earn money by simply asking your audience, if you like this, if you get value from what I'm doing here, then please think about giving us value back. Either value with your time of listening to it, value with your talents. Maybe you might want to help promote the show, or value with your treasure, money, and you can send it over here. And there are podcasters out there who are earning a living from literally doing that, from asking their audiences, if you like what we do, here's where you can help support that particular show. And, I think that's a very exciting place to be.
Well, to that end, I think I'm going to ask you guys to say where people can hear you and where they can give you money at. I want to thank my co-hosts, James and Chris, for joining me. James, what is the latest with you, sir?
Podnews.net is where you should go and get the daily newsletter that I write all about podcasting, if any of this has sounded interesting to you. It's completely free, podnews.net. That's very good. If you want to hear new podcasts, then try newpodcasts.net. Newpodcasts.net is a ton of interesting trailers for new shows every single day, and it's a place where you can push yours as well. And if you want to learn more about me personally, I've got no idea why, but anyway, james.cridland.net is my little home on the internet.
And Chris, what's the latest with you, sir?
Still taking that little bit of a personal sabbatical from my main show just for personal reasons, as one might say, but I'm kind of getting back into the swing of things with it, and so expect back to weekly content with my show, the Kulturecast over in Weirding Way Media, where you and I do all the things that we do, other than the one thing that is a bonus, and that's on my Patreon or your Patreon, patreon.com/Kulturecast, or Projection Booth, where we talk about James Bond once a month with our dear friend Richard Haddam. And it's a small donation on your part to get some extra content in your life. If you're hard up for not having 1,000 episodes of Mike's show or 691 episodes of my show and you need more, that's where you would go to find it.
Well, thank you again, guys, for being on the show. Thanks to everybody for listening. If you want to hear more of me shooting off my mouth, like Chris said, check out the other shows that I work on. They're all available at weirdingwaymedia.com. Thanks especially to the Patreon community. If you want to join the community, visit patreon.com/projectionbooth or go on over to patreon.com/Kulturecast. You can get some good stuff there as well. Every donation we get helps the Projection Booth take over the world.
Kid, I got nothing to say. Quit bugging me, go away. High time you realize I didn't come here to socialize. I'm sick of this American life. And I've learned the value of human sacrifice. I like staring at two glass eyes. Keep them stuffed, museum style. Got alarms set all around in case they move around. I'm sick of this American life. And